Welcome to the Old Man of the Three Things with JJ Redick and the Dunker Spot, Steve Jones and Nekias. Duncan, you notice I always say Nekias first, but today I felt like I'd go with Steve first. Doesn't get top billing on the Dunker Spot, but today on Monday's episode of the Old Man of the Three Things, you get second billing because I'm coming first. Fellas, how we doing? Great weekend of NBA games, by the way.
Certainly full slates of games, can confirm.
Oh, very, very fun stuff. Doing well. Good morning. Happy to be here. Excited to be here. Snuck it in there.
There we go.
All right. We are going to talk about the Minnesota Timberwolves, the 76ers. We're going to give the Magic some love and some looks here. Before we do that, a few things around the NBA that are catching my eye. Clippers 0-4. James Harden minus 28 in the loss yesterday. That experiment, not good so far. Golden State lost again. I think it's obvious. Steve Kerr talked about this after the game. They need a little bit of help, especially offensively. Curry has scored 27% of his team's points so far this season. That's the highest in the NBA. Rockets look awesome. One of four teams to be top 5 or top 10 in offense and defense. Beat Nikola Jokic and the Nuggets yesterday. Jokic had his fourth career 30-20-10 game, tied for third most in NBA history. A little ho-hum game for him. And want to give in appreciation of Jason Gallagher, our wonderful head of content, whatever his title is. I still don't know after 3 years. But Mavs, his team, 8-2. Luka and Kyrie both went for over 30 yesterday. Something's wrong with the Pelicans. Any reaction to any of that, guys? What gets you fired up on those teams?
It's probably Houston looking confident on both ends of the floor. I guess I would start there. I've had a lot of fun watching their defense. It feels like everyone's playing harder. It feels like the help is peeled in earlier. The rotations are crisper. It's all simple stuff, but you look at what they're doing now compared to what it looked like last year, and it feels like a night and day difference. So that's probably where my eyes go first.
I'd probably go Golden State because of the start that they had, the road games that they won, and then it just felt like, oh, here's size. How are you guys going to deal with that? Here's some switching with all that Chris Paul stuff. Do you guys enjoy that and how they try and navigate that? I'm really intrigued to see how they bounce back against the Wolves because Rudy Gobert was roaming off Draymond, and Draymond's been looking to shoot, but it's been mixed results.
Yeah, it's funny. The non-shooting lineups have been a little concerning. You know, even in that game, you brought up Gobert just roaming yesterday. When you've got two of your guys who are playing a significant amount of minutes in Andrew Wiggins and Chris Paul shooting 15% combined from three, that's a problem. I'm not as concerned with Clay. I know he hasn't had a 20-point game yet, but I'm not as concerned with him. He's eventually going to go on a streak, and he'll shoot 41% from three like he always does. It's everyone else. The shooting begets shooting. I always used to tell people that when did I get the most open looks on the court? And it was always when I was playing with other shooters. You know, I think of like Philly, my first year there when we got Ilyasova and Marco Bellinelli on the buyout. And we had lineups with Ersan, me, Ben, Cove, Saric, Bellinelli. Like you just trot out Ben and four shooters and peak Ben putting pressure on the rim, pushing the pace. We got open shots. And right now, defenses are sagging off. At times, in that Wednesday game against Denver, they did put two on the ball. They got some action out of that short roll. They had their back cuts out of the corner. They got two back cuts on back-to-back plays in the fourth quarter. I'm just amazed that Steph Curry, getting ready to turn 36 later this season, is able to still do this. It's remarkable. It truly is remarkable. Let's start with Minnesota. Let's give some small market teams some love. I told somebody on Twitter the other day we were going to be talking about them a ton this season. Let's start with the defense. They are the number one defense in the NBA. 102.0 is their defensive rating. You have to go back to 2020, the Milwaukee Bucks, who had a defensive rating of 102.5, to find a defensive rating that low for an entire season. What has impressed you the most with their defense, and what sort of adjustments have you guys seen with regards to Karl-Anthony Towns specifically and making him and Gobert work together?
I want to say it starts with Rudy, but he looks a lot better than he did last year. He feels more mobile. I think the work that he's doing in drop, it feels back to his defensive player of the year levels. And once you combine that with him showcasing a little bit more comfort in space, whether that's some of the late switches or him just being spaced out in the corner, it feels like the decision-making there has been better. So there hasn't been as many breakdowns. And naturally, if you're removing Rudy from the action, that more than likely means that you're putting Karl-Anthony Towns or Naz Reid in action, whoever he's paired with. And so the fact that he's able to navigate the back end that way, it just kind of has an effect on everyone. If you can't target him, you can't target the other big, where do you go? Because you zoom out with this Minnesota team, like aside from the point guard room, it is a very big unit or very long and rangy unit. So you really don't have as much space to operate with to begin with. And once the back end is tightened up, like it has been this year, you really don't have many places to go in the half court. So I think it starts with what Rudy's been able to do. Jaden McDaniels has been incredibly fun at the point of attack again. I've enjoyed the Nickeil Alexander-Walker minutes. Like they just seem to be more locked in than they were last year.
Rudy has a huge impact on their defense. And I have my question marks about him in space, being able to defend smaller lineups, but he's felt better with his help and recover. He's been able to protect the paint without overcommitting and opening things up. I think when you talk about him and Karl-Anthony Towns working together defensively, one, Rudy being there and his help consistently being there allows Cat to be at the level or put two on the ball, which some would say is his best coverage. But they're also mixing in different things for Cat. We've seen Cat switch a couple times. We've seen Cat be in a drop and maybe try and contain the drive. So they're not just tying Karl-Anthony Towns to one thing, which I think was the issue last year, where it was Rudy does this defensively, Cat does this defensively. Oh no, what do we do? How do we adjust to two schemes? And then I think to Nekias' point, they have a lot of activity with their guards, with their wings. Mike Conley is still going to get after it. Anthony Edwards gets a +10 overall boost depending on the matchup. Jaden McDaniels is very good defensively. And so they have size, they have length, they feel comfortable with their scheme. So defensively, they just keep getting at you, keep getting at you, keep getting at you. But because they can trust that Rudy's going to be in the right position, now they can ramp that up. More ball denials, more activity on screens, more active on handoffs, and then just comes together very well for them right now.
A number of Denver Nuggets players said that during the run last year that they felt the Timberwolves were actually the toughest matchup. And Timberwolves have beat Miami, Boston, New Orleans, who again, struggling, but I still think they ultimately end up being a pretty good team, Golden State, and of course, the Denver Nuggets. And similar to what the Lakers did and similar to what the Timberwolves did at times in that first round series, I liked the other night when they have Cat on Jokic and they allow Gobert to sort of be that roamer and be that sort of help side defender. Now, you can do that when you have Aaron Gordon on the court. There's certain matchups, as Steve brought up, where teams go small. They're gonna put a shooting 4-man probably in that corner. Teams have done that a lot over the last few seasons. But that Denver matchup, it intrigues me. It really does. I think about this Timberwolves team relative to the rest of the NBA. We are roughly, God, my math is bad. Let's call it 12% of the way through the season because most teams have played 9 or 10 games by now. So we're roughly 10 to 12% of the way through the season. I'm pretty positive that the Denver Nuggets are a good team. I'm pretty positive the Boston Celtics are a good team. Philly's a good team. Milwaukee's still figuring things out. Cleveland's had some injuries, some guys in and out of the lineup. Phoenix, same thing. They haven't been whole. Neither of the LA teams look particularly inspiring right now. Golden State, question marks. Houston, they look like a competent team, as you said. New Orleans struggling. Like a lot of the teams that maybe we were all really high on haven't come out of the gates particularly well. For both of you guys, how good is this Minnesota team? How good can this team be? For me, I think some concern in terms of shooting the basketball, in terms of having another floor spacer another guy who can be a consistent knockdown guy, particularly in a playoff series when spacing and matchups really, really become important. But how good can this team be?
I'll go first because I know Nekias can't stand when I do my Minnesota thing. Everything with me is just in a playoff context. I think they are a good team. I think these question marks they have are going to hit them in the playoffs. Rudy defending and spacing against smaller lineups. The switching that they're eventually going to have to deal with concerns me because if Rudy Gobert becomes a switch, and we've seen a lot of teams switch against him in pick and roll, Karl-Anthony Towns becomes a switch. We've seen that in the playoffs, in the play-in, and then this year, it's still a thing to where it's not just like the Jason Tatums and the Klay Thompsons of the world who switch on to Karl-Anthony Towns. I saw Peyton Pritchard switch onto him. I saw Sam Hauser switch onto him. Steph Curry, Chris Paul. In a vacuum, if both of your bigs become switches, what are you going to run late in games? Now, the answer could just be Anthony Edwards continues to do what he's doing, and then, hey, we're having a whole different conversation. But I just think they need to work to take some of these things off the table during the regular season so that during the playoffs, they can kind of hit some of these and they can hit their ceiling.
Why do you hate the regular season? Why are you one of those people that hates the regular season? I thought the whole thing this year was back to basketball. We were going to place an emphasis on the regular season. It's unbelievable. You're supposed to be a champion for the regular season.
I am a champion for the regular season, which is why I want to see them answer these questions during the regular season. But I'm not going to say they're bad or great. I think they're very good. But once they get to the playoffs, those are the things they're going to have to answer. So they got to start answering those questions now.
Fair.
I think, well, as a champion of the regular season, I will just say, kidding. No, I think the switch point is fair. I think just to answer the question broadly, like I think this is very firmly a home court team if they stay relatively healthy. I think this defense is legit. The offense still coming along, and like you mentioned, like Anthony Edwards could just throw a lot of this over the top rope if he's going to make shots like this. The back and forth between him and Draymond was pretty funny, to say the least. But to the switch point, like I think what Rudy does on the glass is going to be pretty important because, like, I mean, people will point to the post-ups. That's very hit or miss, figuratively and literally. If he can create extra opportunities for you, get to the free throw line, get you some extra possessions, I think that can be helpful. Cat, something Steve's been monitoring all year, something that I'm keeping an eye on as well. What he's doing with drives and those post-ups against switches, it feels like there's more patience there. And then Naz Reid, who's just been quietly setting the world on fire from behind the arc and inside the arc. Like, you can't do the switch thing against him, it doesn't seem like. Felt like it took a week and a half before he missed a shot on the post-up. So he's been very good. Like, quietly, as much as I've enjoyed Minnesota's defense this year, the fact that the two big lineups, at least in terms of net rating, are working across the board seems to be a pretty big development. And I think as you get into this playoff context, you see more switches. If the answer becomes, okay, maybe Rudy can't do it, but Naz and Cat can handle it offensively, and you just trust what defense you have on the perimeter to kind of swarm around, like that doesn't seem great considering what you traded for Rudy Gobert, et cetera, et cetera. But it at least seems like they have another option that they can go into and feel pretty good about, which is a development from last year because due to health and just trying to figure things out, the Rudy and Cat thing felt weird on offense. And then once you subbed in Naz Reid, there was a hit on offense or on defense. And so the fact that you have a little bit of optionality between those three bigs now, in addition to what Ant's doing, how good Mike Conley has been, Jaden McDaniels continuing to be a terror on defense, and you see the shot making starting to perk up for him as well. I feel better about them in a playoff context than I did last year.
Well, hold on, because it is important to note, and we've noted this before, that Jaden McDaniels decided to punch a concrete wall when he could have opted for the other side of the tunnel, which had a padded wall, but he opted for the concrete wall. Naz Reid also hurt for that playoff series. I think what Nekias just said, this is what makes, I think, them really intriguing, is they will, assuming health, they will have more optionality. The key piece, I'm very confident Anthony Edwards is a fucking monster. I'm very confident. I think the key piece for me is, can Karl-Anthony Towns play at a high level in the playoffs consistently series to series? Because we have seen, depending on matchups, him struggle at times in that environment. I think that's the key piece for me. But again, I do like the fact that they will have, assuming health, they will have more optionality. this playoff year.
Can I ask a quick question to you, JJ?
You can always ask a quick question.
To see if I can bring back...
don't belabor the question. Make it quick. Yeah.
Just bring back my title back for the regular season. Minnesota's more decisive this year. So I wanted to ask you, how important is identity for a team? Knowing who you are, knowing what you do, and how important is having early season success to kind of mold that? And now that turns into belief over the course of the regular season.
So a few things there. Number one, we talked last week about buy-in. And as a player, when you have a result that makes you feel good, it's much easier to get buy-in. In the case of, Karl-Anthony Towns, I think probably some of the struggles at times, and again, he's played great over the last 3 games, but some of the struggles at times last year, health related for sure. But he's being asked to do something he's never done before in his career. He played 5 his whole career. And when you don't get the results, I think it's harder to get buy-in. On the identity piece, I think the best teams have an identity, which is why right now, if you look at the Milwaukee Bucks, what is their identity right now? Are they? I thought they were going to be just a high pick and roll team over and over and over and over, right? Clear out a side, Giannis and Dame 2-man. Well, I don't know what their offensive identity is. Defensively, they've done a number of different things because they were being asked to do something new the first 4 or 5 games. So I think identity is extremely important, especially once you get to the playoffs. Now, you have to have some versatility. You have to have different lineups you can play. You have to have depth. All that stuff's important. But what is your identity as a team? If you can fall back on that with confidence, that gives you a chance to win night to night. I think about really good teams I was on. Orlando, 2009, 2010, those first 2 years with the Clippers, the 2 teams we had in Philly. I would say those teams, different identities, but those teams had identities. And there was a confidence level every night. Hey, we're playing a great team. Can their greatness beat our greatness, right? I think the Minnesota Timberwolves right now are building that identity, particularly on the defensive end, where they say, okay, we don't have a lot of shooting. We're not taking a lot of threes. We have some spacing issues at times. We have a motherfucker as our number 1, and we have a great defense. Well, that gives us a chance to win night to night. It's a great question. Speaking of identities, let's talk about the Philadelphia 76ers. Again, I feel like we've been talking about them every single week, but we can't overlook a 50 ball. We can't. There's so much to dive into here. I want to start on a serious note. All of us, myself included, wishing Kelly Oubre the best in his recovery. Just absolutely freak accident. And I hope he recovers well. Praying for him, thinking about him, just sending all the well wishes for Kelly right now, who was off to a great start. And just incredibly sad. It was one of the most, I think, shocking Woj tweets and Shams tweets that I've ever come across. And just wanted to wish Kelly well from all of us at the Old Man of the 3, myself, Tommy, Nekias, Steve, everybody. Before we get to Maxey, before we get to Embiid, I've got a bunch of questions for you guys about touches and time of possession. I want to start with one thing, which is vibes. And you go back to the very first day of training camp. This team has had a different vibe. And maybe some of that is Harden not being around. Maybe some of that is hearing a different voice in Nick Nurse. Maybe some of that is maturity. You can have a core group together. One guy leaves, one guy comes in. It can change the vibe. But that has really stood out to me. And even last night, you could tell how badly Joel Embiid wanted Maxey to get the 50 ball. I love the vibes right now in Philly.
It feels like they're playing a lot more free. And you can see that with some of the pace. And I know we'll get into some numbers on Philly specifically shortly, but you can just tell they are playing with and for each other. The ball is popping to a different degree. I won't say it's popping more because, again, we'll get into some of the actual numbers behind this. But you can just tell this is a team that really enjoys each other. And once you see a team playing with joy, you're more than likely going to get some really good results from that squad.
As Chris Webber once said about the Warriors, these guys really enjoy watching each other get off.
Well, there you go. There you go. Couldn't hold it in, huh?
No, I wasn't ready. Biggest thing I would say is just the confidence level these guys have, and everyone knows what they're supposed to bring to the table, and they do that, especially when they have more defenders with Batum, with Covington, with House. Tobias Harris is just enjoying everything about basketball right now, playing with an aggression and passion that we haven't seen in a few years. Maxey and Embiid leading the way. It's fun to kind of watch them just kind of grow. And not to tie it back into the belief, but there's a belief in what they do. They believe in each other. They move the ball. They play hard defensively. That's going to help them down the line.
I like it. Tobias is an interesting one to me. He's having arguably his most efficient year, highest true shooting percentage of his career, third lowest usage percent of his career. Last year, of course, was the lowest of his career. I like the way he's playing and the way at times he's being used. He's consistently taking advantage of size matchups where he has a smaller player on him. They're running quite a bit of after timeout play ATOs for him, where they come out, they see he has the matchup, and they're getting those duck-ins, some flex cuts. Just looking to really take advantage of his size and strength in the low post. And then when he does get the ball on the wing, it is more decisive in terms of, I've got a matchup, I'm going to go try to get to the rim. I'm curious for whoever looked this up. I looked some of this stuff up. But in terms of touches per game for Embiid, for Maxey, for Harris, what Harden, his touches last year. I know it hasn't been updated yet on NBA.com from last night, at least when I checked at 8:00 this morning. But what are you guys seeing in terms of touches?
I can take that one. And just to quickly bounce off the Harris point, even a quieter thing, like I've been eyeing what does the Embiid touches look like with Maxey when passed away. They've also had like Harris right next to Maxey. So if a double team does come, you're kind of further simplifying the read he's going to get. If the help does come off of Maxey has a shot, he passes to Harris, he can now shoot or drive against, again, a smaller matchup. So, like, that's been fun to track. In terms of the touches, can read this all very quickly per second spectrum. Tyrese at 86.3 touches per game this year. That's up from 68.9 last year. Tobias Harris averaging a little over 8 more touches per game this year than last year. Embiid, a slight increase from 70.2 last year to 73.8. So I think that's where your touches are coming in right there. James Harden actually was a very high touch player. Him and Joel Embiid was the most, they had the highest volume pick and rolls ran last year among a duo. And so it's been fun to kind of watch Philadelphia shift from that to, okay, we're not going to run pick and roll as much. We're going to spread the wealth a little bit more. Let's get some of those cuts. Let's get some of those post-ups. Not necessarily from Embiid because his post-ups are down, but it does feel like more of a spread the wealth type thing. And then to the pace point from a little bit earlier, playing more free. They were 27th in seconds per possession last year. They're up to 15th, which is still middle of the pack, but compared to the walk-it-up nature that we saw, and it did kind of feel like two different offenses when Harden was on the floor versus here's the Tyrese and Tobias second unit. Y'all go out there and run and have some fun. It just feels like a more consistent brand of let's get this up quick. Let's get into our offense earlier, and let's bend this defense. So those are kind of things that I've seen in some of the numbers that are popping for me right now.
I like that. I think sometimes people rail on analytics, and I like analytics because oftentimes they reinforce what we see with our eyes. Now, sometimes analytics tell us something different from what we see with our eyes, and I think there's value in that too. But in this case, it's obvious Maxey's getting more touches, time of possession. He's a little over 7 minutes a game. He was at a little over 5 minutes a game. Harden last year was a little under 9 minutes a game. Time of possession for Tobias Harris, a little bit up. Joel Embiid, time of possession. This is interesting, right? No Harden. This is basically the same. So a lot of the Harden touches, Harden ball in his hands has been distributed. Obviously, Maxey a lot, but has been distributed across the board, which certainly ties into what everybody on Philadelphia has been saying for the last 6 weeks in terms of how they want to play and how Nick Nurse wants this offense to run. So I like that stuff. I do want to say one thing. Indiana can't guard shit. I think we should just acknowledge that. We're gonna talk to Tyrese later today about that.
It's a plug.
We're gonna talk to Tyrese
That is one
later
way
today
to do
about that. Halliburton, not Maxey. Halliburton. We'll talk to Tyrese Halliburton later today about that. Their defense. In watching the game last night, it was like, all right, what does Philly want on this possession? Okay, they're gonna get it. And I love the way the Pacers are playing. They're fun to watch. Tyrese orchestrating, they play fast. They shoot a lot of threes. They attack in space. Like, there's a lot of stuff I like. Defensively, I don't know how seriously I can take them as a team, because they really don't do anything that makes you feel uncomfortable. And Maxey last night, the thing I love about Maxey, and this is not a knock on James Harden. This is not, because I said to a bunch of people in the last week when he said, I'm a system. I am a system, right? I'm not a system player. I am a system. Like, he's right. Great offensive players are their own system. And he plays a certain way, and he's had a lot of success in the NBA. He's one of the all-time greats. Not disputing that. I think what is interesting about Maxey is the decisiveness, where he's coming off a pick and roll, feels like he can turn the corner, he turns the corner. He's coming off a pick and roll, or he's an ISO, gets an advantage, shoots a step back three. There's less pound, right? And, I think that ties back into the stat I brought up with Joel and time of possession. It's like, Joel doesn't then, Harden's gone. Joel doesn't have a need or feel like he needs to have the ball more in his hands now that Harden's gone. There's like a trust factor that Maxey's just going to play. And he's going to make the right decision and make the right read. And the ball's eventually going to work its way back to Joel. So the decisiveness I love from Maxey.
I want to jump in real quick and point to Embiid's decisiveness as well when he's passing the ball. If you watch him, if you can see the double come from the post, he's letting that thing go. But on his one-on-ones, on his ISOs where he's bringing it up or he's at the top of the key, if he drives and help comes, that ball is going right out. And that's helping Philadelphia get into their actions and play, throwing the handoffs and the movement they have. And you can just feel that decisiveness from them as a team.
There's a baiting level that he's doing right now, right? He's baiting the double team. He's very comfortable baiting the double team. He's steadily improved on that throughout his career. But he's now doing it a la Jokic, and the numbers back that up, right? He's averaging a career high in assists. He's such a more willing passer out of that double team. There was even a moment last night where the double guy came at a bad angle and Joel split it for the foul. And you're just like, yeah, you're a foul merchant. Yeah. But it's smart, man. It's smart. The guys, did you have something to add there?
Oh, I was just going to quickly drop the passing stat that I had. I was mentioned earlier, like the ball's popping in a different way. I was going to say it's popping more, but it technically isn't. 288 passes a game last year. They're down to 281 this year. But the potential assists have basically remained the same so far. So it feels like more efficient. More people are making the passes versus the team passing more, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. That does make sense. All right, let's move on to our last thing, which is the Orlando Magic. Again, we are fans of giving equitable love across the NBA. There's no way in hell that ESPN would ever let me talk about the Orlando Magic today at 5-4. Love to see it. There's a few things I think we can get into here, but just broadly, both of you, what do you make of their start? And this can be team specific or player specific, but what do you sort of make of their start?
It feels like this was kind of the blueprint for the Orlando Magic this year if they were going to be successful. which is both encouraging and a little bit concerning considering how wild the split is. If you're using NBA.com, they're 20th in offense, they're 4th in defense. If you're using Cleaning the Glass, that filters out garbage time, they're 23rd in offense and 4th in defense. So I have had a ton of fun watching this team defend. Similar to Minnesota, there's just a lot of size on the floor. And those guards, Markelle Fultz, when he's healthy, he's nasty at the point of attack. Jalen Suggs, nasty at the point of attack. And it feels like at least 2 or 3 times a game, he's doing something off the ball. Whether it's a weak side block, whether it's a steal, or maybe it's just he's knocking a pass out of bounds. And it's just like, how in the world did he get to this basketball? He just has a nose for it, as cliche as that sounds. The guards are fun. And then the front court, certainly missing Wendell Carter Jr. But again, you got 6'9", 6'10", 6'11 in the front court. You're not going to have a good time. And Jonathan Isaac, in like the 13 minutes per game that he's playing, he's been insane defensively, both on and off the ball. So it's just not a fun group to play against. But then I go to the other end, and specifically like late in fourth quarters. And as much as I love Jalen, as much as I love Markelle when he's out there, you then look at Franz and Paolo trying to run the offense through them. And every time they face up, they got bodies. They have crowds. And it's just like, I don't know how to, like, they're not competing for a championship this year. So like, I'm not super concerned, but it's just like, okay, it seems clear very early on, there's going to have to be a guard shift somewhere. Whether that's rejiggering the rotation, whether that's longer term, who can we trade for to really complement these 2 star forwards that I believe they are, or at least they will become. But that's kind of the weird balance that I'm having. It's like, oh, cool, they're holding the Bucks to like 87. Oh, wait, they're only up 8 right now because this is a great 3-point shooting team. One of the guards that has been knocking down shots, Gary Harris, it's been a fun resurgence for him. Like, he hasn't been in the lineup consistently because of injury. So I'm just in a weird place with Orlando. I guess this is where I kind of cap it right now.
I kind of want to bounce off that because the growth of Paolo and Franz has been fun. What they can do with space has been good against drop. Their ability to make plays kind of allows their guards to just kind of be themselves, as opposed to you have to be a point guard. You have to make these plays. So it's helped Jalen Suggs elevate. I think Anthony Black's been able to mix in pretty well. Karl-Anthony can continue to do Karl-Anthony things. When you bring it into that late game scenario, my mind goes to switches, and that's part of learning how to win for them right now. So if you're Franz, and yes, you can drive and get that shot, do you know when to drive and kick? Do you now know how to keep that advantage if you get to drive and kick? What actions are you using for Paolo? Is he catching at the elbow? Is he catching in the post? Or is he just kind of facing up on the 3-point line, hoping to make a play? And that's just kind of part of a young team trying to have to figure it out. It's a positive that those two are getting that defensive attention. But at the same time, what do you do with it to turn that into victories?
I think that's what's kind of throwing me off. Like, I don't know what to make of the attention that they're getting late, because I recognize like they are both very good. Like Franz, I don't think you can really single cover. And Paolo, he's just too strong. He will get to the free throw line. He will get to his spots. But I think about the help that they're seeing, and so much of it is, I don't know, it feels like it's less that they're good and more, if we send help here, the ball is going here, and we're okay with that guy shooting. And so like they're creating an advantage, but is it really an advantage for them? And that's where I don't know how to judge. And it also doesn't help that Franz hasn't shot well yet, but I know he can shoot. And Paolo hasn't shot well from deep either. And there's also just in the back of my mind, how willing is he to take threes to begin with?
Yeah.
That I'm kind of starting to monitor.
Yep.
And so it's just like, okay, how well are they even playing off of each other if the help is coming off of them? And so the offense is starting to cloud a little bit of just how fun the defense has been. Again, like they 4th in overall defense, 7th in half-court defense, they're 4th in transition defense, they're a top 10 pick-and-roll defense. They load up very well against ISOs and post-ups. Like, this is a very sound group on defense. I just don't know what to make of the offensive floor or the ceiling right now.
I generally think that in 2023, 2024, that if you are a bottom 5 team in 3-pointers made, 3-pointers attempted, 3-point percentage, and turnover percentage, you're going to struggle to win consistently at a high level. That doesn't mean this team with a great defense, as you guys mentioned, Wendell Carter Jr. healthy, that they can't be in the mix in the Eastern Conference for a playoff spot. I'm a firm believer that they can be in the mix. But the lack of shooting is is obviously the most concerning thing to me. It doesn't mean they're not fun. It doesn't mean I think there's some creative things they can tap into, particularly late game, like you guys are talking about. Paolo late game. Like I think they need to get him more on the move, and I know that's like an Iverson cut right into a drive. I think about the two guys, Wagner and Banchero together. There is a little bit of Tatum and Brown there in terms of how can you use these guys in a two-man game. It's challenging late game because everything's just going to be a switch, right? So figuring out, and this is where the lack of shooting really hurts, because like who you running a ghost screen with to a pick and pop, right? So I think Wendell Carter Jr., I don't know that he solves that, but it helps. But they certainly, if this team is going to sort of take the next step, it's got to be shooting. It's got to be shooting. And I don't know that, again, you talk about, yeah, that's great. Sometimes you get more shooting, and I know this from personal experience, you get more shooting and you sacrifice defense a little bit. So there's going to be a little bit of a trade-off. But something to monitor throughout the season. But it has been a fun start. Love Jamal Mosley. Shout out to the coach. Guys, another fun Monday. Appreciate you guys joining us. This has been the Old Man of the Three Things with Nekias Duncan and Steve Jones.